Funke Treasure Duroduola, who is a broadcast journalist, a certified media trainer, speech and leadership coach, and she was the first female journalist to manage an all-news radio station in the Radio Nigeria network. Good morning, Funke.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So we're talking about adaptive leadership. Now, how does adaptive leadership assist African countries in responding to rapid, in accommodating the cultural and socio-economic diversity within African nations? We understand that we have peculiarities in different regions of Africa. So how does adaptive leadership come in?
Well, first of all, what is leadership? Do we have leadership in Africa? My mentor, John C. Maxwell, says a leader knows the way, shows the way, leads the way. You have to know where you're going. You have to have a vision of it. You have to be willing to show the way, even when you have the knowledge. And you have to be willing to lead the way. Do we have this in African countries? No. Then let's look at adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership is the willingness by a leader to disrupt based on what's on ground for you. You can know the way, this is how to do it, but based on your own peculiar environment, how should you lead the way? I think that's where the challenge is in Africa. For a lot of our leaders, you see why there's a mass exodus of young people and old people even to greener pastures. How have we been able to convert the treasures, that metals, that the minerals, natural minerals, are in Africa, instead of letting it be a curse on the continent? How have we fared in terms of food security? What kind of foods do we have? Do we even have, how much of our foods are we exporting? Because we're largely exporting human resources that should do us well, that should count for something in Africa. And we have huge human resources, but because we are not engaging in adaptive leadership, we lose them every day. So for Africa to move on, we have to create our own path forward. I'll use the example of the BRICS and the rejection of Nigeria recently. So you see, in Africa, would rather take Iran, would rather take Saudi Arabia than take a giant like Nigeria. No matter what the failings of Nigeria is, Nigeria deserves to be at the BRICS. It deserves to be part of the nations that formed BRICS, because we have, look at Iran, we're better than Iran. So I'm saying this in the context of adaptive leadership in Africa. If we do not value that which is ours, if we do not recreate and engage based on our local environment, then we really can't move forward much, because we cannot base our progress, our growth, our development on Western ideals and principles all the time.
Okay, thank you for that. We don't know that to hold our ground and chart our own path forward, like you suggested, is a very big task that needs a lot of courage. And there is no precedence whatsoever in the African continent for now to do that. Now, how do you think African countries can come together and say, okay, no matter what happens, we will face it? What about collaborations between African countries to really chart what I can call the African dream and the African leadership agenda forward? Is there a place for collaboration among African nations? That's my question.
Okay, so you've given me multiple questions in one. So I'm just going to speak to the one that I quickly could write down while you were talking. How should Africans come together? How do Africans come together to chart a way forward? First of all, our currency. I know that lately some leaders have been canvassing for common currency in Africa. That's a way. It may look difficult and tricky, but it's a way to move forward. Trade, aviation in Africa today, if you were going to go to, say, Sierra Leone or Liberia, you know that there is no direct flights to these countries. You probably have to go to Cote d'Ivoire. And I've done this a couple of times, so I know what I'm saying. There is no direct flights to many African countries. You have to go this way, go that way, like meander, merry-go-round before you get to another country. That's not good for trade. So we have to look at how do we how do we map our skies in such a way that it's quicker to get to the next country. Trade, currency, and we already have regional organizations. We have the continental ones, the African Union, we have ECOWAS, we have the SADC, we have all of these regional organizations, but how well are we mining the opportunities available through these regional organizations, and how are we faring at the continental level? Look at what is happening, what has happened in ECOWAS lately because of the coup in Niger. There seems to be a lot of dissonance, amongst the countries. Do we really want to be together? And then again, we have to remove the toga of colonialism. Because if we do not remove that toga, even the post-colonial residue of what I would call bowing down to former colonial leaders, then we're not ready to move forward yet. Africa must say to the Western countries that, look, we are old enough now to pilot our own things, our own ways. We must be dependent less on international charity organizations. We like what I would call not crumbs, but we like largesse. We just like to take from here and there, and then we become stuck to the freebies that we collect from these international charity organizations, because they come with conditions and clauses which we're not able to break free from. We are too much into borrowing, and so we've borrowed the lives of generations ahead of away, such that after this present leadership we've incurred over the years. So I mean, there are areas where we can choose to begin to show leadership. What is wrong with a single currency for Africa? What is even wrong in using your own local currencies to trade instead of strengthening the dollar, the pounds forever? Let us begin to trade in our own currencies so that we can strengthen these currencies.
Okay, so while you were talking, you mentioned that you talked about collaboration within Africa, but we've seen that regardless of the organizations that we have in Africa, such as the AU, the ECOWAS, yet African countries seem to be operating in silos. Now, going forward in collaborating, what specific sectors should we be looking at to maybe take, for example, and say, let's work on this one, and what is the way to achieve that?
The first one I'll talk about is agriculture.
Okay.
We need to have food to eat. There's too much poverty and hunger in Africa, and we need destructive leadership in this sector. We have arable land all over the place, Northern Africa as well. I know that they have platinum mining, diamond mining. We have very rare metals. We have natural resources that are mind-blowing. Look at Nigeria, look at Angola. So oil, agriculture, and all kinds of mining in Africa should be reconstructed deconstructed and reconstructed. We have to reimagine our resources in Africa for us to have a leadership that is proactive and forward moving. The world is moving from oil to solar. How much of solar energy do we have in Africa? Look at what the president of Nigeria is doing with the new ministry on blue ocean. How are we mining the many waters, the resources in the many waters in Africa? Africa is rich, and that is so not a cliche. We are rich, but our problem is leading wisely, disrupting the status quo, what has been handed over to us by these colonial masters, and moving forward with our own kind of leadership. After all, we had our leadership before the white man came into Africa, and we were doing just fine. We had the best civilization. And I'm not even talking about Egyptian civilization. We were, I don't know, it was some sort of whitewashing our brains to think we're not good enough. But it's many years afterwards. It's about time that we break free, or we broke free from this toga of dependence on Western civilization and Western powers and Western resources for us to flourish as a continent.
All right.
So again, to your question, agriculture, mining, and our human resources, yes, as well.
Okay, thank you for that. For all of these to happen, I mean, for us to be able to mine the opportunities, either via trade, agriculture, mining, and what have you, of course, we need peace in Africa. And there are pockets of, violence here and there. This calls to adaptive leadership. How can African leaders show leadership in conflict-prone areas to ensure that we can restore peace largely for inter-country, trade harmonization? What is the place of adaptive leadership? That's my question, in maintaining peace across Africa.
What is the place of adaptive leadership? First of all, why are we having coups and counter coups and coups here, another place, all over the place in Africa? Because the people are not received so far. They are hungry, and many people are dissatisfied with the status, with the kind of leadership we have in Nigeria. So it's about time that to do things differently. When you say adaptive leadership, I'm just going to pan to what I've written earlier. We're looking at emotional intelligence. How are you people that you lead? Again, we're looking at organizational justice. Do we have justice in Africa? If it's the child of the poor man, the justice that you get served is different from the child of the bourgeois. You're looking at character. In this wise, you're looking at transparency and creativity. Adaptive leadership thrives on creativity, leadership, creativity, and there's innovation as well. So how many of our leaders are innovating in leadership? And finally, we're looking at development, learning and growing continually. How much is dedicated, to education in African countries? How many leaders encourage children of nobodies to grow? Look at when they begin to appoint people into critical sectors and ministries. Do you really find a majority of those who are going to help a president or a leader govern, be people of competence? Use the people we ask to come and serve in governance should be people of competence, character, and capacity. These 3 C's are important in adaptive leadership. You don't want to pan to the whims and caprices of party people. You want to do the right thing for the people, so that, especially food. For Africa to move forward, there has to be a way that our leaders will grow our own food. We cannot be importing everything and think that we are on the path of adaptive leadership. We have land wasting, we have water wasting. What will it take us to invest in agriculture in Nigeria, in Niger, in Botswana? Botswana is even doing quite well. In many countries, you talk about coups. Why will I not overthrow you if I'm not happy? And the majority of the people are groaning under your nepotistic leadership. So Africa has to rethink leadership. It has to reimagine leadership. It has to deconstruct that long time orientation from our colonial masters. And this is way back. They have to just deconstruct and reconstruct. We have all these organizations, African Union, there's AFCT, the one on trade. It's very, very critical to Africa right now. But how much of investment do we have from African countries to these regional organizations?
We're still having Dausa Osamaze in the studio. Now, some of the things she's talked about is nepotism. It's those who are being led not being happy with the system of leadership. So what is the way through adaptive leadership to ensure inclusivity so that those who are being led are part of the decision process, the decision-making process, and then we can have sustainable development in Africa?
Yeah, it's part of the things that we need to grapple with as a people. There are a whole lot of factors responsible for this, and it's, how am I going to put it now? The ability to manage our diversity. This is really called challenge. That if we are able to manage our diversity and prioritize business and, for example, healthcare, without allowing politics to interfere with it, Africa will emerge. The problem we have is that we do politics with very critical things that will bring us to the fore. We play politics with education, we play politics with investment, we play politics with health, and these are the issues that are actually pulling Africa down. Take, for example, healthcare. Let the president say, wake up one day and said, well, we have to improve on our healthcare because our life depends on it. And me, I will not travel out of this country to go and take healthcare anywhere, and no minister will do. What do you think will happen? Our hospitals will emerge. It's as simple as that. So this is all we need to do. We need to lead by example. We need to demonstrate to the people we lead that we are actually serious on getting to a destination. And I think that's kind of commitment that African people lead from their leaders. They are not really asking for too much. All they just want to see is that you do what you preach.
All right, so let's get back to Funke. Yes. Before you left, my colleague was talking about the role of, including people, everybody, so we feel like we belong to the same, fold. And that has been attended to by Idausa. But then let me ask you, what is the place of followership, even in making it easy for leaders to do their job? Because they say if people get the kind of leaders they deserve, followership is as much of a problem as leadership is in Africa. Do you believe that?
Yes, I do. And I want to commend Mr. Idausa. I'm not sure if it's a doctor yet, so please forgive me if I say Mr. Idausa. I want to agree with your points about health in Africa. I mean, I'm an advocate for menstrual health and hygiene. I believe it's time for Africa to begin to look at the welfare of the children and the girl child in terms of equity and providing them with menstrual products so that we can have more girls in school and stem the tide of out-of-school girls in Africa generally and in Nigeria particularly. Now, to your question of followership. Of course, followership is much a challenge in Africa as much as leadership, because if you do not have an active and proactive followership, you're going to continue to feed the nepotism that we see. You're going to have to see a continual feeding of the kind of system of governance that we are actually experiencing in Africa. So I know that there's a professor in Harvard who did a book on followership, a really seminal work on followership, and she went on. If I knew I was going to be speaking about followership, I would have revisited that book. But yes, followership in Africa has to change. We have to stop whining and whining. We have to be actively involved in leadership. If you reject something, and reject it in a loud way, in a better way than complaining. There's a difference in complaining and making a point and using the collective to say no to something or to an issue. If we say we demand for constitutional reviews, if we say and we stand on it, and we find our ways to say, look, this has to stop. A situation in Osun where a governor appoints only his family people into state governance, you know that that's not right. But what are the people of Osun State? Have you heard any loud what do I call it now? A loud no from Osun. Let me put it that way. No, what we have had are pockets of this is not okay. This is not. But is there a definite dissociation from such a stand? I mean, in some quarters, I even heard somebody saying that, the son of the president in Nigeria should be a minister, and I laughed. No matter his competence. Why? There are people, this is Nigeria brimming with smart people, intelligent, brilliant souls, brilliant people in different sectors. And yet, some part of leadership are saying, why do we not have the president's son being part of the minister? So you see that followership is the problem. The moment you become a leader in Nigeria, people expect that you begin to give them their own part of the national cake. It's the same in many parts of Africa. Once you're there, they expect that your constituency has to be serviced. You have to give them this and give them that. We cannot move forward like that. No, we can't.
Thank you very much, Funke Treasure Duroduola. There's a leadership coach and certified media trader, for talking to us this morning about adaptive leadership for Africa. We value very much your contribution on the show today. Thank you. All right, before we wrap up, I just want to say that part of the issue that we have too with followership is sycophancy. Because when the leaders are not doing well, or in areas where they're not doing well, those around them don't tell them the truth. Full pocket gains.
Okay, I'll speak to that. It is being joked about that there is freedom of speech. But freedom after speech, I can't guarantee. See, what the zone you are going to is a very tough zone for.
Okay, am I shaking tables?
You're shaking tables in Africa, really. African leaders, with due respect to them, many of them don't have the humility to listen to followership. And by their action, they call for sycophancy. If you talk, if you're not careful, you are rebelling. If you don't talk, you are disrespectful. So this puts followers in a kind of corner, in a block. It takes only a very, sensitive leader to give room to followers to talk. I don't see many African followers being able to challenge their bosses.
It also, do you agree, or it is an obedience of table manners? You don't talk while you're eating.
Well, I have said that earlier on while we began this conversation. The problem starts from the home. Because when you have leadership failure in the home, then of course you cannot expect a society that will brim with great leaders. If Ayo would not give room to his wife to speak or his children to have opinion How will he become a president and allow his minister to contribute? And I think these are issues that we will need to be talking to in due time to see how we can encourage people to air their opinion, and then we are not offended by contributions of others.
Well, it seems all the legs of the tables have been broken. So we're going to break so we can get to furniture maker to fix them, and then we continue the conversation. Now, when I mention table manners, for those who don't understand, well, it's just an informal way of saying those who benefit from a system do not criticize the system.